Welcome to the Gavel. I am Terry Ikumi. We are still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and although federal lawmakers are not sitting, the leadership has been meeting with relevant parties on how it can best be handled, especially as it concerns palliatives for the most vulnerable in the society. While the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives met with President Muhammadu Buhari.
We had an engagement with Mr. President to discuss with him what we have resolved in the leadership of the National Assembly and our opinion on various issues regarding the fight against COVID-19 in Nigeria, as well as going forward. For example, the various donations that we are receiving should go into a single account and should have a management fund committee that will be in charge of releases, and accountability and transparency requires that we have that separation. So, and I believe that the Presidential Task Force is doing a very good job. They have been very proactive, and they deserve our commendation. It is also an opportunity for us to commend Nigerians and corporate bodies that have given us donations, but we believe that there should be more coordination as far as the management of the funds donated are concerned.
Meanwhile, the Speaker has been meeting with relevant players in the electricity sector to find a way around providing free electricity for 2 months for the poorest and most vulnerable persons. Here's a report on that.
The subject of free electricity has been a subject of public discussion since the lockdown to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Many have been calling for free electricity, which they see as a palliative to help deal with the stay-at-home order of the federal government. The Speaker of the House of Representatives has been leading this conversation for at least 2 months of free electricity for vulnerable.
It's very important that we know that we're here.
One of such conversations held at the office of the Speaker and had in attendance the big players in the electricity sector and the GMD of the Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation. According to the Power Reform Act, NERIC was given additional responsibilities for setting up and administering a fund called Power Consumer Assistance Fund. The Speaker questioned how that fund could be utilized for free electricity to the vulnerable.
There is an obligation to take from that fund to subsidize. In fact, the word that is used is subsidize in the law. To subsidize, and it describes the class of people you subsidize, the poor, vulnerable people in society.
If you go by this act and the definition, that underprivileged that is speaking to subsidizing would mean that a portion of their rate will not be paid, but it will not be from 55 billion. However, during this period, they want a situation where the government then pays, because like one or two of them said to me, they are not able to go out and collect. And remember, they are also predicating this on what they have heard in Ghana, heard in India. So those are two different things.
As the meeting progressed, it became clear that for the vulnerable to get free electricity, someone else had to pay the cost.
So when you say don't pay electricity bills for 2 months, you are literally saying somebody should carry this cost and this margin for 2 months. I think it's the best principle that we need to agree. Yeah. Is that what we want to do?
Yeah, of course.
Then we can now come back to who is going to carry it. And one of the speaker, we cannot guarantee 24 hours power in this country. It's not possible within the field.
The Nigerians don't care about all of these things that we said.
Just give me the lines.
All they care about is that you give them the basic necessity of life. And I've repeated this over and over again that we're not doing them a favor. Giving people life is not doing them a favor. Because life is not meant to be a privilege. It's meant to be a right.
The Speaker also met with the Minister of Power, and after those rounds of meetings, the House of Representatives and stakeholders in the power sector agreed to set up a joint implementation committee on the proposed 2-month free power supply to the poor and vulnerable Nigerians as part of the stimulus package aimed at alleviating the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, one of the challenges, however, would be identifying those extremely poor households that are connected to the national grid. Moving on, the Nigerian economy, like others across the world, is taking a hit due to the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the areas of concern would be how the federal government can best handle the revenue generation challenge now and when this ends, and also sustain businesses and preserve jobs. Well, here's my conversation with the chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Finance, James Faleke, on the subject matter.
We saw this crisis coming and the effects, especially on Nigerians. And that brought up the issue of the bill moved by Mr. Speaker, and which was supported by all of us, to the effect that we needed to look ahead and give palliatives to Nigerians so that the income, we are everyday, majority of us are everyday income earners. What we did was to say, okay, let's look at what palliatives we can bring. And this bill came up to give tax holidays. We look at areas of electricity, we look at areas of import.
We'll get to the areas of electricity. Since you mentioned the bill, I think we should take it one step at a time. You also mentioned that the bill was to look out for daily income earners. What aspect of the bill and what were the details of that portion of the bill?
Yeah, if you look at the bill that we passed was to say, look, this crisis is basically economic. I mean, more of medical, and in terms of medical facilities, equipment, government needed to give succor to hospitals who are medical practitioners who are into importation of equipment and medication and drugs. And so the idea was to give free duty, the duty-free importation, which of course will have an effect on the general populace. So that was taken. And of course, we also look at the tax holidays for majority of Nigerian companies so that they do not lay off the staff. We never knew that this lockdown was going to be this much, but we are then looking at those for you to still be able to keep your staff. Let's give these tax holidays. So if you give these tax holidays, as it is now, tax have not been laid off. No company has announced laid off of staff. What it means is that they are still going to pay them their salaries. As much as government is also is paying salaries, even though majority of us are sitting at home. And so we needed to do that to be able to give confidence in the system.
When you talk about tax and what this bill sought to achieve, it was quite clear that this bill was supposed to achieve a tax cut to avoid companies folding up and increasing the unemployment rate. However, what the federal government is doing now is not exactly what the bill sought to do. I know the Speaker has met with the President and the National Assembly has met with some other ministers on issues like this.
There are two ways to this. When we passed our bill, we didn't know that the federal government also, of course, was going to come up with their own palliatives in that line. We were not looking at that. And when the bill was passed, the Senate would have concurred, if not that they lost a former member of the Senate. And so they were unable to sit that particular day. But we had expected that along the line, they will call an emergency session to ratify this important bill, although it has not happened, and I'm sure it will happen. But before then, the federal government had also come up with the same palliative, as if we had a meeting before, which was never the case. And the federal government had given this tax deferral. When you defer tax, when you cut tax, you are saying, look, listen.
Yeah, first of all, they are two different things.
Yeah, they are two different things. But don't pay your tax now. There was a tax cut. If you have, the medium scale, of course, enterprises, that is already in the Finance Act of 2019. If you have a turnover of less than 25 million, you are exempted from paying tax. But the government now came up with a tax relief. Of course, do not pay tax within this period. It also came up with moratorium of if you have loan, okay, you do not pay your interest within this period. So, I think the government has done well in looking at this.
So you support, the experts have also said that we should, for our expenditure during this period, we should focus more on Naira expenditure and less of the dollar.
that we should focus more on.
Yeah, most of our expenditure, local foreign, should take more precedence on the naira instead of the dollar.
When our major income, of course, is dollar-based.
But that's also having a negative effect right now because we can't make that kind of revenue as it stands now.
I think that it is time for us to sit down as a government and look at this diversification that the government started and see how we can make it more elaborate so that in a way that our oil revenue will just be secondary rather than being the first point of call. As it is now, my fear as an individual is that after this whole epidemic is off and we are off the red line, we'll be back to square one in terms of economics. Surviving will be another issue. I expect that we will tap into our Greek, we tap into mineral resources and all other sectors and look inward, do things that are right so that Nigerians will be better off. I also want to say that, honestly speaking, when I look at, from my little experience as the chairman of finance, there's no reason for us to be borrowing money if and only if Nigerians are sincere to themselves, especially the operators of this economy. If you are in the oil sector, be sincere to Nigeria and pay your taxes.
I think one of the things you pointed out was that most of these companies who collect this foreign exchange, who correct forex to import, do not do those importations. Talk more about that.
No, you see, we find ourselves in an economy where both Nigerians and foreigners have manipulated the system to suit themselves. First, we have foreign companies who come into Nigeria to invest. They hardly bring in money here. They make their money here, use it, repatriate the funds. They apply for forex with the basis that we want to buy equipment to retool our factory. Those equipments are never purchased. They are never purchased. So they take the forex, round trip, and make money and repatriate it. They go overseas, they allegedly go overseas to say they are going to borrow money overseas, and they bring in, they so-called bring in the papers. Okay, not the money, they bring in the papers, and they say the money that they have sourced overseas have been used to import equipment, okay? And they take tax credit for that. And those equipments are never brought into Nigeria. And they then apply for forex to pay this loan that never existed in the first instance. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's like they have tax credit for documented equipment that were alleged to have been imported, which did not come in entirely. They then go to CBN, apply for forex to pay this loan that does not exist. Now, these are some of the things we have seen. You go to immigration. You say you have need for foreign expats or whatever you call it, and then they give you an expatriate quota. You apply for it. They don't come. And then you create an account and say you are paying for this expats outside Nigeria. Well, it is Nigerians that are also colluding with them. Do you understand? So I think when we start, by the grace of God, if God gives us and Nigeria clears and the whole system clears, Nigeria will see it is worse than the subsidies.
I'm very curious as to how you found this out and how this has been allowed to go on undetected for so long.
Well, how we find out, we leave that. But for the fact that it has been allowed to go on for so long is because those who are operating the system are also part and parcel of that deal. The system, for example, says, okay, you have brought in equipment worth $1 billion, and you are allowed to use it as an expense, okay? And you get tax. Instead of paying tax, you are getting what we call capital allowance on that particular on that particular equipment. Everybody will believe strongly that those who say they have imported equipment.
So I think it still boils down to scrutiny and oversight. It may not have fallen on you, but there were people before you, there were committees in the National Assembly saddled with the responsibility of oversighting things like this.
No, you see, it's very difficult for, let me give you an instance, that an oil company, for example, says that they have brought in so and so equipment. It's difficult for you to say you want to see the equipment. You find it difficult to believe.
Is it difficult or impossible?
Difficult, I say, not impossible.
So it can be achieved?
It can be achieved, of course.
So what exactly could be the reason why over time we have not been able to
that I can't answer, but now that we are ready to do it, and God will guide us to do it.
One area we should look at as we consider the aftershock of this whole pandemic is the rate of unemployment could rise. We look at the UK and it's happening already. Jobs are being cut in the UK. With these fears in mind, what kind of legislation are we looking at? Or what kind of policies, if it doesn't fall on the National Assembly, on the executive, what kind of policies should we be looking at beyond providing tax incentives for businesses to ensure that at least we can contain this to an extent?
I think the greatest problem we have in this country is that we are a consumption-based economy. We are not productive. We don't produce anything other than import and import and import. And as long as we continue in that line, we are likely to go down. For me, I think the best approach is for us to concentrate on how we can come up with productive entities. Early in the section, I moved a motion requesting for government to, not even knowing that we are going to have this problem, requesting government to look at moribund companies, intervene. Take, for example, an assembling plant. Look at what they need. Sit down with them, look at what they need, pump money into it, and give them moratorium within which to pay back.
What happened to that motion? It seemed you made
yeah, of course we did the motion. I don't know what has happened to it. I think maybe the government did not buy it. The government did not buy into.
But this brings me to some of the resolutions passed in the House. Makes it seem like it's an assembly.
Yeah.
It's a House that just passes resolutions and doesn't do follow-up.
Motions is advisory.
Yes,
okay?
but do you follow up on that?
It's not a force of law. And I think we've tried to look at how we can make our motions to have the weight of law. And that's the best approach. Generally, parliamentarians work more on motions. So we can't force government. We will tell them, this is what we see, this is what we expect government to do. And of course, we follow it up. For me, I think that the best approach for this country is to tackle the issue of power, diversification, power, diversification, unemployment. If you get your power right, forget it. We won't go anywhere. Nigerians will come back home. But there's no power, no electricity. And unfortunately, these discos or gencos or whatever you call them, they bought our power plants at giveaway. You apply to say you are going to produce, you want to be part and parcel of those who will provide power. And then they give a criteria and you say you qualify, you bid it. Now you have not even brought in money to that system. To worsen it all, you now give estimated billing. You refuse to give meters to the houses just because you want to be ripping Nigerians off. Look, I don't know what it will cost Nigeria to get out of this bondage.
Well, on that, I know that two things have happened. One, there's been a bill in the House of Representatives to criminalize estimated billing. It's passed. It has passed in the House of Representatives. No idea where that bill is right at the moment. And then the Senate President has also said that they would have to review the contract of the privatization process.
If we can do that, look, let me tell you, I've seen some documents where you reach agreement with private sector, private companies in Nigeria. And because they know they will not perform, they go and put the arbitration outside Nigeria in a foreign country. And Nigerian government will sign such a thing. I don't understand. I have seen agreements where the arbitration is in France. The power sector, the arbitrations are they are not in Nigeria. So if they tell you tomorrow that for me to get out of as a distributor of power or Genco, you have to pay me $10 billion. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? They force that bill on you. the way the system was done. But I bet you, if with this country must survive, there are no two ways to it. We must get out of it.
Here's what the leader of the APC said in response to some policies of the government which he thinks can be better. He said the government should maintain expenditures and adding that the natural instinct will be to reduce spending at this point.
I think the Minister of Finance had come up with has come out a review of the appropriation to see areas that can be where the cost can be reduced, and I think that they've looked at administrative expenditures where you have to replace furniture every year, all those minor expenses, and that to me I think is a welcome development. For now, you cannot lay off staff. Okay, listen, the budget of this country, when you hear 10 trillions budget appropriation, you expect that maybe about 50% of that will be for capital expenditure. No, it's about 70% are for recurrent personnel. In other words, we are top heavy in terms of personnel. Okay, I saw a particular agency that has 1,500 staff. 1,500 staff. When we were looking at doing some jobs in Committee of Finance, and I tried to find out how much do you make into the system. In 1 year, that agency contributed 2.5 million naira into the system. But every month, the salary is about 90 million naira. And you can continue like that.
So what should government do in this instance?
What government should do is to see how we can get ourselves industrialized. And because as it is now, government is the main source of employment. Okay, a graduate will write you as a member, we want job. They want government employment. And the government is not there. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if we are able to get ourselves industrialized, there will be less emphasis on government job because the industries will pay better, okay? But as it is, until we get to that level, we just have to find a way of getting out of our problem.
You mentioned the budget and the cuts in the budget. There have been questions as to whether the federal government can cut the budget without passing it through the National Assembly.
No, that's not what the government has done. The government has, they put their ideas together, areas within which the appropriation can be reduced before bringing it to the National Assembly.
So the government can announce a cut in the budget before bringing it to the National Assembly?
The government can always say, but they cannot effect it until it is passed by the National Assembly.
Honorable Faleke, the world over, some countries are considering a COVID-19 law. Is this something that the National Assembly will be looking to consider? And are there specific aspects, based on what we've seen here, that you think that should be contained in that bill?
I agree with that idea. I think that the experience we are passing through now is a wake-up call for us to look at all the laws relating to medical care in Nigeria. Good enough that this challenge too has brought up the capacity, the medical capacity we have in this country. And I think that the government has seen the need for us to rehabilitate, to refurbish, to build new hospitals, so that even this export of our medical doctors will come back, the majority of them will come back to Nigeria and take care of us. For me, I think that whatever law, whatever amendments we have to make to any law, we should be ready to do it, and we will do it. This I'm sure of.
Well, that's it on The Gavel. Remember to stay safe. I am Terry Ikumi. Bye.